39.
Number 1.
39.
1.
38.
37.
36.
35.
34.
33.
32.
31.
30.
29.
28. 27.
26.
25.
24.
23.
22.
21.
20.
19.
18. 17. 16.
15.
14.
13.
12.
11.
10. 9. 8.
7. 6.
5.
4.
3.
2.
1. It's time for mouthwash. Giddy up. All right. Welcome to the Mouthwash Talk Show, a minty, fresh take on politics. And hey, we have a familiar guest on our show. We have, well, back then he was House of Representatives, Indiana House Representative John Jacob, but he's still Indiana House Representatives John Jacob in my mind. So we have him on tonight. We're going to talk about property taxes because he knows his way around the House and he's been through the ringer with these folks down there that make up our laws. And I thought, what better person to bring on tonight than John Jacob to talk about that? And before you get started, I don't even want to hear the jokes about John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmitz. That's getting old. Just don't do it, okay? So it was funny once, and I know Lucy's probably going to bring it up. But this is what we have tonight. We were supposed to have some District 5 people on here, and I'm not even going to mention their names because they got all flaky towards the end of this thing, trying to come on and not come on or whatever. And, we try to keep this show equally with the Libertarian, the Democrat, and the Republican. But sometimes the Democrats don't want to come on the show. So I don't know about that. Now, next week, we do have a pretty good show coming up. We're going to have the mayoral candidates. And so far, I have 3 out of the 4 to come on. And we'll have them come on for about 15, 20 minutes each. We're not going to do a debate. But we do want you to find out what the heck you're going to be voting for in the GOP primary coming up, because I think that little feller's heating up a little bit. I think we're going to see some action here. I know that one of the candidates has spent a whole lot of money. So you probably be getting tired of getting the mailers and seeing the TV ads and all that. So, but hey, must be important. If they're going to spend some money, that must mean they want the job. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and we do have a sponsor. We got a sponsor tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and run the ad here. Now, this sponsor, this is Beanbo Breads. They're the largest bakery in the whole wide world. So they're going to need employees. And so I'm going to run this ad here. And this is Beanbo Bakeries. Call that number right there if you want a job. You actually go deliver the bread, set up the displays, and take care of things. You can make some pretty good bread doing the job. So got that out of the way. And let's see. Is that all that we're going to talk about? I think that's all we're going to talk about. I'm going to go ahead and bring on John Jacob. And some of these people that may not know him or not, we're going to ask him to tell us a little bit about himself. So let's bring on John Jacob. How are you this evening?
Oh, I'm doing great, John. Thank you. I'm doing better than I deserve.
Yeah. Hey, you got the beard going there. Like you need a little hat there, and we could call you Amish or something. I don't know. It's like,
I've gotten everything from Moses and John the Baptist, Abraham Lincoln, to Al Qaeda.
and John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmitz, but we're not going to go there. But so tell our audience a little bit about yourself. Maybe they hadn't seen it. It's been a minute since you've been on the show. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're about.
Well, I'm a lifetime Southsider. I'm married, have 6 kids, 5 grandkids. I was elected to the Indiana General Assembly as a state representative in November of 2020, upset the incumbent at that time, and was a big surprise to the Republican establishment swamp. So I think along with Representative Curtin Isley, who is another life and liberty person that I worked with closely, who is a veteran for the last, for 2021, 2022. And we turned the tables upside down in the figuratively speaking, in the General Assembly. And when I went to run for re-election in 2022 in the primary, the Republican establishment ran a smear campaign and launched over $660,000 from the HRCC, from the House Campaign Republican Campaign Committee.
Wow. Yeah, I do.
Right, towards my opponent when I was defeated.
Yeah, I do remember that. One of the things that was very, very heartbreaking, as anyone would know that knows you, that you are the most pro-life guy that I would probably say in the 7-state, maybe country. And they ran an ad against you because you voted against a bill that didn't go far enough to protect life. And they used that against you. And that was, I think that was maybe one of the lowlights I have ever seen in politics as far as kicking somebody in the pills. That one was hard to swallow for sure. So, all right. Well, we're going to talk about property taxes, and I thought you'd be a good one to have on here because you can tell us what maybe that the legislature can and can't do. And I know you were with the Board of Accounts, State Board of Accounts. What were you with when you worked for the?
Yeah, I worked for the State Board of Accounts for almost 30 years as an auditor. They're a government watchdog agency that audits government.
Yeah. So, yeah, you watchdogged and they made the dog take a walk. So let's see. I'm gonna go. I don't think I have anything. I did do this one little thing. I did go to the NRA convention. Got a little press pass there. Went down and talked to the people inside, and I talked to the people outside. But we're not going to talk about that tonight. But that was what I would usually do, is play peepsters on the streets here. But we're going to go ahead. I would go ahead and bring Lucy on here. We'll put them in the hot seat first, John, before that, because look, Lucy's trying to get extra points with the, maybe you get one of those 10 kids to deliver bread.
Actually, I've got one of my kids that needs a job, but I'll have to see if they've got any opportunities way down here in Southern Indiana. This is from my local gas station that I go to, and when I saw that Bimbo was there, I was like, I'm going to show my sponsor some love. We're going to put them up the whole darn show.
That little chocolate thing up there looks pretty tasty. I wish I'd have eaten before the show.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can tell I'm not missing any meals here. So I'm a Bimbo fan myself.
You got to stay healthy. It's like my grandma had this saying, a plump wife is a happy life, or so, I don't know. It's something like that. But anyway, so, all right, let's go ahead and bring Jordan on, put him on the hot seat here. Jordan, how you doing tonight?
Doing good. How are you guys doing tonight?
Yeah. He warned me before the show he's going by the book tonight. I don't know what that means, but he's going by the book. So we'll let's get to it here. Now I don't know where Greg Merriweather is. He's not backstage yet. So if he does happen to pop in here, we'll bring him on. I know last week was sort of more of a listening show, but it was very interesting about how the voting machines work. So let's go ahead and bring John back out here, and let's get this party started. Well, I'll go ahead and get it started with my property taxes. I have mine here. I have my little sheet, and we'll just go over a couple numbers here. So my assessed value for 2021 to 22 was $193,000. My assessed value for last year was $301,000. So that's $107,000 increase on my assessed value. I've not done anything to my house last year. I did fix it up. I have $2,100 more in taxes. Hey, the good news is it only went up 50% this year. Now, my taxes in 2020 for paying 19 were $700. So I did some remodeling. I get it. I fixed my house up. Well, bad me. Why would I do that? Why would I want to fix up my house? That's terrible. You shouldn't be doing that. So I had a 475% increase in 21 and a 676% increase in 22. And this year, only a 50% increase. So I feel like I'm winning the game now. So that ought to get some juices started on what's up with this mess. And maybe, John, you could tell me why. We had a 1%, 2%, 3% cap. What happened to that thing? I mean, it's like.
Well, the 1, 2, 3% cap is it's graduated. So it's one of the 1% cap is essentially on your primary residence. I think there's questionability as to whether, I mean, not from my perspective, but the government stating that your primary residence has the 1% cap of assessed value. You can have, I think, I want to say one outbuilding. I think they were saying that if you have more than one outbuilding on the property, that they can essentially tax you upwards of 3% on those extra buildings on the property as well. I had somebody else that was reaching out to me about that they were wanting to press that to have a lawsuit against the state on it, but there were people complaining because they had other things on their primary residence, other like mini barns and stuff like that, and they were taxing them at a higher rate for those, and even though it was their primary residence. So the 2%, the 3%, those typically are going on other things that are non primary residence, and then also the 3% I believe is also on like rental properties and stuff like that.
That makes me feel a lot better because I tore down 2 outbuildings. I tore down a little mini garage that was here forever and another garage. So wow, I really hit the lottery on mine. I actually tore down stuff and got taxed more. So that's great. Now, Lucy, I can see you up there. Your bimbo bread is boiling, and I know you already think you had to look at that intro I had about taxes theft and property tax theft. You had to love that, but chime in and have some commentary first. I want to hear your commentary, then I want to hear a question.
Well, first, I want everybody to remember that it's bimbo. I'm not a bimbo. I'm a bimbo. So I got to get that one straight first, so we got it pronounced correctly. Taxation is theft, and property tax is one of the most severe and punitive taxes that there are because they're sold to us as a lovey-dovey, well, how would we pay for the schools? And, we need to do this for the children. But the fact of the matter is, and I just put this into the chat for everybody to go look at, is that this is the very first thing that Karl Marx attacks with his 10 planks of Marxism. The very first thing that he attacks is the abolition of private property and the use of all the rent that comes in for public purposes. So when you think about God having 10 commandments, Satan always has a counterfeit. And this is one of the satanic counterfeits in our modern times, is the 10 planks of Marxism. So feel free to go there. The nice website there, the Laissez-Faire Republic, goes on to explain a little bit on each of the 10 planks of communist Marxism. For example, under abolition of private property and land and the application of all rents of land to public purposes, that's number one. Number two is the progressive or graduated income tax, meaning that you pay a higher percentage if you earn more money. So the harder you work, the more the government steals and the more they dampen your enthusiasm for earning. And then, of course, number three, the abolition of all rights of inheritance. What is one of the things that the government is dead set on is stopping any sort of generational wealth transfer, because your ability to make your lives better for your children and grandchildren is anathema to them. So I'll just start off right there.
Well, who sits around and thinks about this? This Marxism guy, he must have had a lot of time. No, I know what you're thinking about, but this Marxism guy and the socialist communist guy, who sits around and think, maybe they're on their phone back in the 1800s. I'm going to come up with a deal here that is going to take over the world later. I won't be here, but it's going to be screwing everybody up later. Ha ha ha. So, Jordan, I know you said you're going by the book tonight. What do you got for us?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So I agree with you, Lucy, in intrinsic principle. Yeah, I'll give you that. Capitalism's like uranium. You got to handle it with special conditions. When you allow it to run wild in conditions, it becomes very disproportionate and it tends to harm the inhabitants that tend to coexist with it. It seems to me that today Republicans that are cozying up to economists and those who are the elites, they tend to look at things a little bit differently. They tend to look at strategies and numbers. They tend to see people as numbers and this property. This is the potential value we can get off this family. It's a relief valve situation. It's kind of like House that failed, but House Bill 359, that's Tax Matters, essentially talking about the liability of taxes. Even looking at that, trying to give a little bit back to the homestead, it seems to me that they're afraid to actually cap that relief valve just in case there's inflation over government spending, municipal spending, or issues with reallocating any money. I think that it needs to be treated like anything nuclear. It is going to have some type of fallout if you don't have a set limit for it. We promote capitalism on a huge scale, which is great. I mean, that's how you're going to make it in America, is if you have a great idea, become competitive and make it. But however, there needs to be at the high echelons in government, there needs to be some type of a smarter system of controlling the taxes. Now, Republicans were supposed to be about limited government. In this case, when you have a majority of our Republicans voting for these things, it's too hard to look at this to not assume that they're not being bought either by the establishment or they are businessmen and women themselves and they're protecting their interests and not the people that they represent. So that's my response to you, Lou.
Okay, so you've just opened it up for me to take a little bit of hit on Republicans here. See, the problem with Republicans is they won't actually do what they say they believe in. And John, you witnessed this, you experienced this, you led the charge to actually protect unborn babies. Now, I'm 51. My entire life, Roe versus Wade has been here, and Republicans have used as a fundraising point that those evil Democrats want to kill babies, but we really want to protect babies. We Republicans want to protect babies. And if you just give us the chance, we'll make sure that we protect babies in the womb. And then when John worked very, very hard in this state to do exactly that, to absolutely draw a line and say abortion is murder, abortion is wrong, we're going to protect babies, what did the Republicans do? They fought him, funded a campaign against him, and drove him out of the legislature so that he couldn't protect babies. Taxes are the same way. You talk a good game, you say all the right words. I've even heard some Republicans say that taxation is theft. But when it comes right down to it, you love spending the public money too. John, what was your experience in the legislature with that?
Oh, no. I don't like spending public money. And I think, sorry, I'll give you one second, John. I have to respond to that. I want to bounce this back.
Right,
Cool.
okay.
No, Lucy, I don't think
me and
that
John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmitz will just listen here. Go ahead.
All right. So, Lucy, no, I believe 100% in transparency. John is one of the pioneers that's out there helping us reform the party from the establishment. When you get down to the core root of it, you get out to rural Indiana, that's where you're going to find true conservative values. And you're going to find that it's not different really from libertarians, except it's more calm, matured, and it has, it sees the world in a bigger altruistic type of view, but they like to be left to their own self, if that makes sense. But when you start going towards any type of cause that has weight, or anything, you're going to see that you're going to have issues. I'm not going to deny the fact that the Republican Party here in our state has control issues or don't follow what they preach to the masses. However, we have to work with what we have. And people like John etched us forward by 30 or 40 feet by standing on his moral principles, by saying, look, first thing first, under God, life is sacred. If you know how hard it is for life to come into the world, you would appreciate it more. He brought alive the intention of that we do not take humanity at humanity's word anymore. There's no humanity in the word anymore, that we're allowing babies to be murdered for someone's profit down the road. So we are separate from the establishment, just like the Democrats will say they're separate from their establishment. And then you have Republicans, everyday Republicans, who believe in philosophy, practice philosophy before they preach it. So I get what you're saying with the establishment. I 100% agree with you. But when it comes to the rest of us Republicans, they don't speak.
Yeah. So there's a question in there. So John, just pick something.
Yeah, I think Jordan, I agree with part of what you're saying. Lucy, I agree totally. Like your initial response, I totally agree. And there's a lot of different points I think I could go to. I mean, I'm going to come back to the Republican platform, I think, in a minute here, Jordan, and as it relates to taxes. But that's absolutely true. Property taxes specifically is theft, and I think that taxes overall is theft. And when the government, at its core, we not just property tax, but they take taxes and then they squander it. I mean, I take it very seriously. I mean, with my own budget. So I think that when we give our tax money over to the government should be responsible for what they use. But They don't. They just squander it. Now, getting specifically on the issue of property taxes, this is an issue I brought up over and over in the legislature, is that, this isn't rocket science. You own your property. It's yours. Yet they levy a property tax against your property. Very simply, if you don't pay your property taxes, the government has the right to be able to bulldoze you and take your property and put it up for tax sale and confiscate it. Now, I had a couple different pieces of legislation when I was in the first term in 2021 during the when we did the budget bill. I had an amendment on the bill which would amend the Indiana code specifically to bring your property tax bill down to zero. So I originally wanted to ban property tax, but obviously I can't do that because it's integrated into the Constitution. So when I talked to the Legislative Services attorney about this, I said, how can we go about this? Because obviously getting a constitutional change to the Indiana Constitution, which was really stupid, by the way, that they ever integrated that into the Constitution. That infuriated me. But anyway, that's a whole other side. We can get to that later if we want. But as I talked with the attorney, he said, we could change the code to actually make it so that your assessed value, you get 100% deduction on your property tax bill. So great, tax me all you want to. You can have a 10,000%, whatever you want. But if my assessed value, if I get a standard deduction of, if I get a deduction of 100%, that means my tax bill is always going to be zero. So, of course, Jordan, again, it was the Republicans who filleted me on the floor. I believe it was Tim Brown, I think, was the head of the Ways and Means Committee, got up and just ripped me a new one. And he said, where are we going to get the money to fund education? And where are we going to get the money to fund public safety? And by the way, I'm a big public safety guy. Public education, publication has gone down the tube. Again, another time, another place, another show. But I brought up to him, I said, look, I'm not saying if you want to fund those things, okay, fine. We can find another way to do that. And there is a way that, we can always modify bills. Bills can be modified. If you don't like the bill in its present form, there is a process throughout the legislative session that you can actually modify those bills. They could, if they really believe in lower taxes, they could have they could have let the amendment pass, and then they could have figured out another funding source, but they chose not to. So they killed the amendment on the floor. So I thought, well, okay, so that one died. In the 22 session, I went ahead and picked up another amendment where I thought, okay, fine. They don't want to reduce the tax bill to zero. So I thought, fine, assess people, send them a bill, and then people could do whatever they want to with the bill. But I had an amendment bill that would actually make it such that the government could never confiscate your property for non-payment of your property tax bill. And again, that bill died in committee. So, Jordan, that was the Republicans that killed those bills. It wasn't the Democrats. And I know. And I'm reasonable. What other people say is that, oh, you're just unreasonable. You're just too hard line. I'm like, no. I mean, I'll negotiate with you, and we can come up with an alternative plan to deal with the issue. But don't tell me that it's okay to tax people's property, and it's something that they own. And you're saying that if they don't pay this property tax bill, then they can come and confiscate it. No, you don't. Then you never own your property. You never own your property.
I think it's double taxation. I mean, if you think about it. So there's another little line on here that says personal property tax, and it's just basically $500. So honestly, they could come and say, hey, you got all this other property that you probably bought and paid tax on already once that they could put on here. So there's plenty of room for them to add more taxing on there. So this is one of the problems I have, the taxation of our property. Didn't we leave England because they were taxing us too much and we wanted to have our own property, and here we are later. But what's really frustrating is, John, the 2 years you were in the House, you tried to address this situation. And here we are today where I was in the bank line today talking to some people, and they were all mad about their property taxes. I mean, there wasn't one person that had their property taxes go down. And everybody was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay this. We had one lady here a couple of years ago in our neighborhood. She's on a fixed income, couldn't pay the premium that they raised on her taxes, and she had to sell her house and move in with her daughter. And I just think that's just wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. So I don't know how we get this message out, but I hear that they're going to put some sort of relief bill in the legislature, but this is a county thing. It's not really much of a state law thing. The counties are the ones that do the property taxing. So, and then we have these things called TIFs that we have involved with property taxes, and then referendums to get around property taxes. So talk about one or both of those things. I know, let's do TIFs first. Let's do the TIF first. Let's talk about that.
Oh, TIFs. So, you're talking about the
tax increment funding. That's where, say they assess your house at $100 now, they come in and they make up this area, they borrow this money to build a park or whatever. Well, the park comes in and boy, your property values go up, and that level in between there is what they take out to pay the loan back. So I call it spending our tax money before we collect it type of deal. So,
nice.
So if we put say we put a moratorium on property tax, can't raise them anymore. We have like 80 TIFs in Marion County. How are those supposed to get paid back if there's no increment? So there's a lot of issues that are wrapped up in this property tax thing.
Honestly, I'm not real good on TIFs, but I'm aware that they are for specific areas and everything else. I mean, to me, they're just another layer on top of property taxes, just like the referendums are. And God only knows why. I mean, we just had one here in Perry Township where I live in this last election, and I'm just kind of like, how do you guys justify? Why would you self-inflict that on yourself? I mean, because to vote for the people. I'm like, you're insane. I'm like, no. And they're like, well, it's for education. I'm like, yeah, we have something else for that right now. It's called property tax. So now you got to sit there and have an additional tax on top of it.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Washington Township had a $400 million referendum. So you add that into the property tax increase. I wouldn't want to live in that township. I mean, and then they go out and they build these monstrous schools. Actually, actually, that would have been Lawrence Township. I laid bricks on Lawrence Central, and we built this beautiful school. I mean, it had all the bells and whistles and just great stuff. And I just wonder if that's the best thing. Or Perry Meridian, you're from the South Side. Perry Meridian built a new football stadium back where the old track was. That's where I went to high school, by the way. I went there. And they built a concession stand. And I'm a mason contractor. I looked at that, and they used ground face block, which a regular block's around $2 a piece. A ground face block is about $16 a piece. Wow. So why do we have this fancy, basically a refreshment stand that's going to be used about 15 times a year to cost that kind of money? To me, that is where you get back to the wasteful spending. And are we spending our money wisely at these with the tax money? And while I'm at it, another one, I've been listening to the radio and I hear these commercials come on the air for high school sports. Not one, not two, but like weeks of these, the commissioner coming on, the governor coming on. Have you heard any of those, Jordan? Have you heard? I think at WIBC, I hear the commercial on there. Why are we advertising for high school sports when everybody knows that the only people to go to the high school sports are the kids' parents and grandparents? So to me, it's like, why are we spending all these dollars for that? So that was my
well,
rant.
I went to Lawrence. So I was in Lawrence Township. So I went to Lawrence Township, Lawrence North, and sports and marching band were really big there. So it really does help with character development. There are people in the community who have longevity with the high schools that enjoy going and seeing the games. I think there's pride in when you move away from home, you graduate, you move away, you come back, you make this your homestead, and you go, you take your child to the first game, and they're going to be their future high school. It kind of builds camaraderie, but it builds up an honor. Lawrence Township, they just now expanded on the schools, both schools. Lawrence North, near my senior year, got a brand new Olympic-sized pool, which it did bring revenue to the area, but it also allowed more student activity, which I'm a big believer in. If we keep the kids active, get them in team-oriented environments, I think it really does a good job with their character building. So that could be justified spending the money there. However, taking that money and reallocating it to something else that had nothing to do with it originally, that is the issue. So if we're going to tell the taxpayers that we're going to ask for this money, then we want transparency all the way through. We want to see oversight. If you're going to start borrowing against future revenue off of property, then you should easily tell us that this project's going to cost more or less based on the current market. So we should show more transparency to the consumer and the voter in that area versus than just truly taking their word on anything when it comes to
Can we add a little honesty to this discussion? Because you said we're not going to ask the consumer, we're not going to ask the taxpayer for this money without all these wonderful disclosures and everything happens. Let's be very clear. Politicians are not asking you for money. They're demanding it. If you don't pay what they're asking for, eventually men with guns show up and they either kill you or they put you in a cage or they drag you out of your house.
Well, luckily, Lucy, there are great men and women out there. Luckily for us, there are great women and men out there that are trying to get into the legislature to actually bring common sense laws back and give people more freedom and more power. I do believe you can be conservative, but still hold on to your individualism and not have to give into such large government. After all,
So
we need less government, which means the current sitting Republicans.
We need no government.
What's up?
We need there is nobody that has authority
No,
over
we
me
need
except
less
God.
government.
No government. There is
We
nobody
agree
with authority
together
except for
mutually.
God.
Okay, so we got
that
a
we
less government,
better
no
Anarchist.
government.
I'm an
Which is why there's
anarchist.
federal
And I'm not going to say
regulation.
anything. What do
We
you
can't live
say,
in a
John
utopia.
Jacob? What do you say?
I know we can't live in a utopia.
Yeah. What do you say about, I mean, obviously we need less government, but let's put it this way. If you could, you've been in the mothership, you worked there, you've been in the legislature. What is the biggest, I guess, the most blatant, offensive thing that it happens down there? If you had to pick one thing, what would it be?
Well, you always know I would say the slaughtering of innocent babies. That's number one. But so let's scale back. Let's scale down a little bit. There's some pinnacle speeches that I made that I just butted heads, just all out war with the establishment. And one of them specifically was an abortion bill. So bear with me because this does deal with the issue of taxes in a sense, because I got to the end of this bill. It was another stupid regulatory bill where they were going to regulate baby murder. I got to the end of the speech that I was doing on why I was not going to vote for another regulatory bill on regulating baby murder, because I would never vote for a bill to regulate regular murder. I would make it criminal. So I said, this bill has nothing to do with saving babies. It has everything to do with money and elections. That's what this bill is about. And Houston Speaker Todd Houston was furious.
He was a little mad.
He was ticked off.
If he was one of the seven dwarfs, he would have been grumpy.
He shut me off on the floor, and he said, "Representative Jacobs, speak to the bill." And I said, "I am speaking to the bill." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Speak to the bill." And then so I was wrapping up, so I knew that I was going to possibly get thrown off the floor if I kept on going with that one. So I got my piece out. But yeah, I mean, Jordan, I mean, look, I'm a Republican. I stand on the Republican platform. I like the Republican platform. Less government, less taxes. That's what I stood for. There was a lot of legislation that I put out there to try to scale back taxes. One being property tax and other taxes as well, gas tax, income tax, a variety of other things that I did to try to bring back some sound fiscal policies to Indiana. But again, the Republican establishment swamp didn't want it. So Jordan, this is where I do disagree. the vast majority of Republicans, and I mean vast majority, I say over 99% of Republicans in this state and across the country are traitors to the Republican platform.
Lucy would agree with that, I'm sure.
I would have to agree with
maybe
you
a higher
slightly on that
percentage.
one.
100%.
I agree.
And I'd like
There's a
I'd
lot
like
of
to
me
say,
that it's true.
and I'm pragmatic.
It's true.
I do not
it's unequivocal.
I don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. You know, if we need to start out in New York City and, you know, make it to Hawaii, and you want to, get off the Freedom Train in Kansas, that's cool for you, but I'm going all the way. But the more that we can get people to accept their responsibility to be free, most people that don't want true freedom, they don't realize it, but they're actually against individual responsibility. With real freedom comes absolute individual responsibility. I live on a little mini farm. I'm growing my own food. My goal is to not give the grocery stores any money, or to severely reduce the amount of money that I give grocery stores. If 90% of us were now like we were in the 1930s, when, you know, there were more farmers and people grew their own food, then Kroger and Walmart and a lot of the big producers would be out of money. They are not in favor of your individual responsibility. They would rather that you be enslaved to, you know, to exactly what we're doing here on now on Facebook. Shoot, I'm contributing to this.
Yeah, with your beambo. So
John, at some point here, before we get off, I don't want to, so you go on, keep on going with this, but at some point, I want to read a few pieces of the concept of the U.S. and the state constitution that bears in line with the issue of property tax once you get to wherever you're going.
Okay, well, I was just going to say, what happens to people? Now, we got some, you know, you've laid the foundation for somebody to come in and sort of and put these people's feet to the fire. So we got Becky Cash, we have Larissa Sweet. There's probably 3 or 4 or 5 others that are in there. And they've sort of already scared Larissa Sweet when she, you know, wanted to defend the Kinsey Institute, which is like, why the heck are we funding that in the first place? But anyway, and, you know, the usual suspects came up and they tried to ambush her on the floor when she was speaking. And you could tell she was nervous and scared. Now, Becky Cash, she is fearless. She is not afraid of them. And she's going about things a little differently than she's trying to play their game. But I don't think that it's a game you can't play, and it's a game you can't win.
Yeah, I had that. I had that defunded the Kinsey. I did that in 2021 on the House budget.
Yeah, and I think that those things are still going. We're still working on the library thing, the illicit material in libraries. I hear that's getting stuck back in somewhere, but you know, we did make some progress with the Senate Bill 480. It sort of went through without, you know, too much chopping it up. So what makes people change? Do they just get down there and they just sort of feel like, I don't want to rock the boat, or does it just go to their head? What would you say is what happens there? To me, these people go in with all these great intentions. Now, you're one of the very few that stuck to your guns, and we see what happened to you. So is that it? Is it the fear of being rejected, or?
Well, it's this little one word called caucus. In caucus, you know what caucus is, right? Yeah, you know what? I'll explain caucus for.
Yeah, dude. Thank you for our audience. Some of our audience.
So caucus is where the Republicans and the Democrats. So we go into session, and there's these bills out there for third and second reading and everything, and then you go. They close down the session, and then we meet for caucus. Well, we go behind secret doors. Nobody sees what's going on. These are private meetings, and in these caucus meetings, they discuss how they're going to vote on the bills, and they will try to get uniformity on how they're going to vote. They will try to get amendments that are being ran, and they will try to those that are dangerous to them. They will try to bully the people that are running those amendments so that they won't run the amendments. And believe me, in caucus, they beat you up. They beat the snot out of you. And lest anybody say that it's not like that, frankly, I mean, I was in one caucus meeting before I was even sworn in after I was elected. And I was, let's just say I was never formally kicked out, but I was never invited back to caucus.
It was like
Uh,
asked not to show up.
I'll tell you this. I mean, I asked for rules on caucus, and there were no rules. So I'm not obligated and beholden to what these other people that go into caucus, because basically caucus is like Las Vegas. What happens in caucus stays in caucus. There's a basically a I don't want to say if it's an oath, but it's an informal agreement that they have that you're not going to reveal what's going on in caucus to anybody. And if you witnessed what happens in a caucus meeting, you would look at that and say, this is domestic abuse. And I'm not overstating the case. I have never gone into a meeting that has been so abusive, I think, in my entire life. And believe me, I've been in some pretty nasty situations, like street preaching and everything else. So
Wow, it's almost like hazing.
Why people flip? Because they beat them up. They beat people up. They beat you up and they make you conform, and they will bully you. They will bully you. They'll cuss you out. They'll scream at you. They will spiritually abuse you in there. They will use God to sit there and try to further their agenda in that caucus, to sit there and say, oh, like, we really prayed about this, and I really believe the Lord would have us do this. I'm like, really?
Gaslighting.
Even though it militates against Scripture.
Yeah.
Like, really? Wow. Okay.
So that does make some, that makes it more clear of how that works. And I know that my senator, Michael Young, not the other Young, Todd Young, Michael Young, he left the caucus because him and in the Senate, him and the pro tem got into it, and I don't know what it is, but it was personal. So neither one of them speak of it. So it must have happened in caucus on his way out or something, because I talked to both of them and I asked them about it, and they're like, ooh, that's yeah, we're not going to talk about that. It's personal, so it was good. So yeah. So our viewer Spiro, he loved your insight on that, John. So, hey, that was a very good explanation of caucus. I did not know that it was that, let's put it, heated or frustrating, but that sounds like it's no good there. So where were we? Let's do another round of questions. And then, John, I want you to read some Constitution to us, because I think that'll be interesting. I don't think a lot of people really know what is in the Constitution. They may be surprised. I bet you Lucy knows, because she reads everything. But so we'll start with Jordan. One more round of questions. So Jordan, giddy up.
To respond to you, John, about what you said, I appreciate that level of honesty. And that is a level of honesty that I think the grassroots needs to know. They need to understand that there's a culture of the Republican Party in our state house that is unbecoming, even in a frat house, and how we treat people in humanity and how we approach our constituents is just god awful. And I would like it to be known that with these issues being shown, it challenges the Republican to its core. What we stand on, what our principles are. For me, being a Republican, it's moral based for me. It's things that can help me to help myself and to help others that I love, not being always dependent on one another. But in this case, the culture that's in that state house, any bill that is for the people, any bill that has been worked across the aisle that would have had the public support, they will shoot it down because they're beholden to a whole nother interest that is not the Republican standard whatsoever. And I applaud you for being honest and open about it. And I hope people know that you are an honorable man. And I don't think that you will sit up here and you will lie. This is a guy who was a Republican that represented us vehemently. And they not only came after him personally, but what they did in the redistricting as well. It was systematic. And that shows that in the Republican Party, we need to destroy this culture of destroying our own party members. We need to unite. And John, I hope these words really ring clear to people tonight that listened. And go talk to your constituents, go talk to your elected official and ask them, tell me what goes on in a caucus. Ask these questions. We have a right to know. And that's where transparency can start. Transparency with humanity. I thank you for that, John.
Thanks.
All right, Lucy. I don't think there was a question, so we'll go to Lucy.
So I went ahead and put a couple of things in the comments. I'm a pretty big fan of the Constitution, although I think the Articles of Confederation were better, and that we were sold out through the Constitution. That's another whole discussion for another day. But for those who are going to be really interested in what John is about to say about the federal and the state constitutions, there is no other better advocate and explainer of the constitutions than the Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate. He's not officially the candidate yet. Of course, he's just declared his candidacy. He still needs to earn it, but that would be Andrew Horning. And Andy is a very, very good man. So more just comment, and then let's get on to the good stuff.
All right. Mr. Jacob, what do you have for us, constitutionally speaking?
Well, this is pretty simple. I'm going to start with the U.S. Constitution. So, unlike Lucy, I am not an anarchist. I do believe in government. I believe that according to the Bible, Romans 13, that God institutes governments. He institutes governments to punish the evildoer. Aside from that, I don't see anything else in Romans 13 other than the government being there to maintain law and order so that there's public safety and that people can't just get away with murder, stealing, committing crimes. But I'm going to go. So, and the Bible says that we are to submit to authority. However, I want to caveat this. People think authority means, well, that means we're supposed to listen to the president, we're supposed to listen to Congress, we're supposed to listen to the General Assembly, we're supposed to listen to the governor. Let's make something very clear. When Romans 13 talks about the king, we don't live in a monarchy. We live in a constitutional republic. So the question becomes, who is king in the United States? Now, one could argue, say it's we the people, but as far as the document, the governing structure that we go to, I would say first and foremost, it is the U.S. Constitution. That's the first starting place. And then I would say then it flows down to the Indiana Constitution, and then any laws that are within the boundaries of the U.S. and Indiana Constitution. By the way, as another side note, I would say the vast majority of laws are outside of the boundaries of the U.S. and Indiana Constitution. That's a whole other show by itself. But let's go to the U.S. Constitution Amendment 5. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it talks about no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment and indictment of a grand jury. So anyway, I'm going to go on further back towards the end of Amendment 5 of the U.S. Constitution. It says, no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. Here it goes. Nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Okay. It says
I like it so far.
Okay. So now let's go back to the Indiana Constitution. Article 1, Section 22 specifically says that the privilege of the debtor to enjoy the necessary comforts of life, which I would assume, I think most people would say, yeah, my property, my home, those are my comforts of life, a roof over my head at a minimum. That would be a necessary comfort of life, shall be recognized by wholesome laws exempting a reasonable amount of property from seizure or sale for the payment of any debt or liability hereafter contracted, and there shall be no imprisonment for debt except in case of fraud. So the bottom line is, I mean, if you go just by the U.S. and state Constitution, now I'm going to get to Article 10 of the Indiana Constitution, because I know especially my Democratic friends, are going to sit there and say, well, yeah, but John, property taxes in the Indiana Constitution. I'll get to that. This preceded Article 10. You cannot read the U.S. and the Indiana Constitution as if it's some uniform document, as if all of the document is equal in its weight. Now, I'm sorry, what comes first carries much more weight to things that are amended into the Indiana Constitution on the latter part here. So keep in mind that property tax was not put into the Indiana Constitution, I believe, until like I think the first amendment was like sometime in the 1960s or 70s. So prior to that, we did not have that in the Indiana Constitution. And even though it's in there, this doesn't take away from Amendment 5 of the U.S. Constitution, and it doesn't take away from Article 1, Section 22 of the Indiana Constitution. You cannot seize somebody's personal property because of non-payment of property tax. It's unconstitutional. And frankly, it's criminal. And anybody who would uphold that, I would say they're a criminal themselves. And frankly, they have no business representing us as we the people. They're incompetent. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just saying that. And I'll say one more comment in relationship to this, just to show you the tone in the Republican establishment of their disdain for the Constitution. I knew that I was in for a battle. I remember one of the first bills I voted no on. And I had one of the more conservative members of the establishment swamp, the Republican establishment swamp, that came over to me, and I can't remember what the bill was. And they said, John, why did you vote no on that bill? And I think he was asking me sincerely. And I said, because it was unconstitutional. And then it dawned on me. I thought, either this guy he's a veteran, either this guy has never read the U.S. and Indiana Constitution, or he reads it and he just blows it off and he could care less about it. But that's the attitude. That is the average attitude of the average legislature. They do not care for the Constitution. They hold their laws that they write over the U.S. and the state constitution.
So don't you have legislative assistants that are supposed to guide you through that process to, make sure it's constitutional and all that?
You do, but all they can do is recommend. If I tell an attorney from LSA to write the bill the way that I want, I explain to them, this is what kind of bill I want. And then they take care of all the explicit places that the law has to be changed to make that philosophy or concept to be integrated into the law. They'll do it, and then it's a back and forth of, I take it, I reread it, and then I see whether or not it's satisfying what I'm wanting. If not, I ask them to revise it. They're at our beck and call. So if I ask them to revise a bill or whatever, if I ask them to write legislation, they have to do what I ask them to do. And there's been times there's been times where the attorneys have said, you probably don't want to do that, and I ask them why not, and they've explained to me why. And sometimes their comments are legit. Like when I wanted to write a bill to try to see how I could try to ban property tax. Well, when I talked to the attorney, he said, there's no way. You really have to just make a constitutional amendment, which that's a long, arduous. So he said, so why don't, as we talked about it, we came to, let's get an amendment where you can bring the property tax bill down to zero for a deduction, have 100% deduction, and it still keeps the Constitution intact, but it gives the net effect for the property tax owner. It gives them a zero property tax bill. So that's one example.
Yeah,
I'd just like to point out on the property tax bill that it was the short-sightedness irresponsibility and uneducated folks who screamed, and this has been what, 15 years ago, that, oh my gosh, property taxes are unconstitutional in Indiana. So instead of taking the right path, which would have been to eliminate property taxes because they are not constitutional, instead people just absolutely rallied and demanded for their own demise. And now we have a plank of our Constitution that is property taxes. And we didn't have that before. People are dumb.
And I don't know where we get off of this runaway train. It seems like it's different than that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do something a little different here. This is sort of an audible. I'm going to do some action items for people in their property taxes. So John, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be on the hot seat here for a second, and you can be in my spot. How's that? So folks, you're probably wondering, what can you do? What can you do about your property taxes? Well, I'll tell you what you can do is you can appeal them. I want every single person to appeal their property taxes. Now, as I said earlier in the show, if you're paying attention, we appealed our property taxes last year, and maybe somebody can help me with this, but don't they have to at least acknowledge the fact that we appealed these property taxes from last year? I mean, we have the stamp form and everything. So you just go online to your county, whatever, and you'll have an appeal process, and you pull it up and take some time to appeal your property taxes, and then do some comps and get a little bit of stuff together. But I guarantee you one thing, if you appeal them, they'll look at it, and you'll probably get some kind of, they'll lower it just to make you feel like, hey, we did something for you. So that's your first action item. And then the other one I was going to say, well, let's just don't pay them. And then we'll get an attorney to represent us in a class action and say it's unconstitutional for you to take our houses. I prefer you to do the first one because that's probably not going to get you in trouble. That second one, if you want to be a rebel like me, you do that one and see how that works out. So with that being said, John, are you going to stick around for the conspiracy theory? I mean, you generally do. I mean, you're
Yep. I got.
Okay. So let's get ready for that, and we'll put our tinfoil hats on as the night wasn't already sort of interesting with how the legislature works and how the Constitution works, and they really weren't together on a lot of things. So let's roll that beautiful footage to get our tinfoil hats. How about that? Hey, y'all, better get your tinfoil hats out. It's time for the conspiracy theory. Come on now, let's go. All right. Oops, I didn't push the right button. There we go. So let me put us down here. I'll put Lucy up on the left. That'll make her head explode. To be on the left. Hey, you got the bricks in the wall. Is that because you're at the firing squad for your previous conspiracy?
No, it's out of respect for our sponsor so that nobody thinks that our sponsor is condoning my conspiracy theories.
I just got to look at Jacob's fat. I love the fact that he's been on our show so much he knows how this pony show works. So and George's not even cracking a smile. He's out there. So this is awesome. So we're gonna let our guests go first tonight, and then we're gonna save Lucy for last. And so go ahead, John. What kind of conspiracy you might want to throw out there? There's so much stuff floating around right now.
So does it have to actually be does it have to be true? It has to be true or not, or is it?
No, it can be whatever. It's Lucy does conspirafact. Tiffany didn't do anything. Jordan has stuff that generally is in there. So this is just sort of, we're trying to make it light. We're trying to make it fun and light and silly sometimes serious. So okay. Whatever.
So here's mine. My conspiracy is that they conspired to put property taxes in place way back in time because they knew at some point in time that Klaus Schwab was going to be here on the scene. And with the World Economic Forum to have the Great Reset, to stage us for the one world government talked about in the book of Revelation and as set out in UN Agenda 2030, so that when you can't pay your property taxes, you either have to take that mark of the beast or they come and take your property. So you have no place to live. And so therefore you will forfeit your property.
Wow, that was taken right out of Lucy's book. With other than Bill, you did. If you would have said Bill Gates, then I would have thought it was Lucy talking. So okay, Jordan, what do you got for me? What do you got?
The only thing that I got is my conspiracy theory is that SpaceX canceled their megalith rocket launch because they really didn't want to hurt NASA's pride by launching something they built in their backyard. That takes bureaucrats years to do right. So that's my conspiracy theory. Other conspiracy theories is if it does launch, if it blows up, it's because of aliens, hands down.
It's aliens, yeah. Well, I heard they were having trouble with the automatic can opener, and they had to have that fixed or whatever. It was all that. Now, this is my conspiracy, and we got Tiffany. I'm going to shout out to Tiffany there now, because the rule is 45 days before the primary you can't be on a show, but she doesn't have a challenger, so I went round and around with the Channel 40 all the way up until about 4 o'clock yesterday before our show aired to convince them that it's okay to have her on there for this situation. But so Channel 40 doesn't get all up in arms. We're going to have Tiffany back on after the second. So, but I appreciate her being in the audience. But this conspiracy is actually has both Tiffany and Ed involved. So this involves Spirit Airlines. If you've paid attention to our shows, Ed is a big fan of Spirit Airlines. He's had flights canceled. He's had, as a matter of fact, I think his last time he was on our air, I think Spirit Airlines actually hijacked the feed on him. So now how does Tiffany come in? Well, Ed's being held hostage. He didn't get a promotion at Lowe's. He's being held hostage on a Spirit airline. And you know who the pilot is? Bigfoot. Bigfoot is the pilot on this airplane, and he is and this is the last picture I saw of him. He was headed to the plane right there. There he is. He's going to the plane. He's like, hey, is that my plane? And Tiffany is one of the flight attendants on the plane because she's in on the whole thing. She's actually orchestrated. She said, we're going to fly up to South Bend, which is northern Indiana. I never figured that out. And we're going to pick up Ed. We're going to tell him he's got a free trip on Spirit, and we're going to hijack him. So the Bigfoot's flying the plane, Tiffany's the flight attendant, and Ed is being held hostage. And I think we really should start a GoFundMe to see because it's a big ransom that they're going to ask. I'm sure of it. So that's my pretty much conspiracy fact. So Lucy, can you beat that?
I don't know. I might be able to beat that. I might be able to beat that. So let's stick with the theme, which is property taxes. And Bill Gates, of course, is involved because Bill Gates is the largest private landowner in the whole country right now. So he probably gets all of his taxes abated. But this is conspirafact. And what it is that the government and individuals who serve in the government or use the government to exert pressure and control over the rest of us, they never wanted us to own our property to begin with. We're just cows. We just live on their farm. We are the ones that produce the milk in the form of taxes. And so it's our labor and the stealing of our labor that becomes important to them. And that's why, for example, there is a huge government outcry against the tiny house movement, against people converting their vans or school buses into mobile homes, literally, because you don't get to tax somebody the same way and steal a portion of their labor the same way as you do if they've taken up a permanent location that you can tax. And of course, if you happen to make your humble abode even less humble and a better abode like you did, John, then you're punished for that and they take more from you. So what this is about at its core is keeping you at subsistence level so that you're barely able to meet your obligations to your own body as a human being and eat and sleep and then go tomorrow and do it the other, again. Because if you have any excess time on your hands, you might just think, why am I doing all this in the first place? And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I do ask myself why about 4 times a day anymore. It just seems like the world's getting crazier and crazier on things. Now,
it will get worse. It will get worse with the CBDCs because your money will expire and you won't be able to have any savings at all. It won't be able to pass generationally. People don't really realize what's coming. And if you're still stuck in the cities, then private message me. I've been a mortgage broker since '96. I'm speaking at the Indiana Patriot Homesteading Conference a week from Saturday, all about how to finance your homestead. If you're stuck in the cities when this happens, it's pretty easy to lock down 465 or 265. It's easy to sequester you and starve you in the cities. It's a little bit harder to starve people that are out in the country and that have taken personal responsibility and are being self-sufficient. Not impossible, but harder.
But hard. Yeah. Well, I mean, other than, the Bigfoot getting you and tornadoes running over you out in the rural area, it's pretty good living, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Now, John, I want to ask you the question. Have you heard of the movie Nefarious, John Jacob?
I have.
Have you seen it? Oh, you muted.
My wife is advising me there's it's not the same one that you're talking about.
Okay, yeah, this is a sort of a new one. It's sort of I've heard all sorts of things about it. So it's really dark, but I guess it has a better meaning. I don't know. I gotta see the thing. I'm really curious now about it. So all right. Well, I will probably be doing a couple things here after, but John, go ahead and stay on after. We'll do a little debrief on the show. And anybody have any comments they want to put out there? I mean, we're getting close to primary time and all that. So anybody? Okay. All right. Well, let me do my little thing here for the 10 of 40, and then I'll see you all backstage. And then, hey, everybody else, hey, thanks for watching. And we'll see you next week. So far, we have 3 and probably 4 we have all 4 GOP candidates coming on. So that'll be, you'll get a chance to talk to them if you haven't already seen mailers and commercials and all that from them. So, it's an interesting group of people. So I think it'll be good. And we'll have them on separately, and we'll have our panel that'll ask questions, and we'll see what happens. We'll see if we can't get somebody unelected or elected, or maybe both. I don't know. So, all right, I'm going to put y'all backstage and fix this up. And thanks for watching, everybody. Got to get my stuff off of me here. I got to look presentable for TV. Hi, this is John Schmitz for the Mouthwash Talk Show, a minty fresh take on politics. And hey, I want to welcome you to our show tonight, all you Channel 40 viewers. And we've got a really nice show for you. We have a former House Representative, John Jacob, going to talk about property taxes, Constitution, and all sorts of other things. So we hope you enjoy the show. So let's go ahead and let's get to meet John Jacob, and then we'll bring the panel on for some questions.